Hello there and welcome once again to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett along with Kent Myers. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues. We're glad you're with us today. Today we're going to focus on politics.
Yeah, it couldn't be more topical considering what's going on nowadays with the presidential race on both sides of the party system kind of in a turmoil, or at least very interesting. And we've got a guy coming on today that's going to, for his sixth appearance, by the way, he's not a known.
Not a rookie.
Not a rookie. Keith Gaddie, Professor Keith Gaddie, is going to be on talking about the political races both nationally and locally.
Should be interesting. So much political turmoil go around, especially in the national races. Keith Gaddie's just the guy to give us some opinions and allow this conversation to continue. It's all coming up today on The Verdict. Keith Gaddie, our guest.
I've been fortunate enough to premiere every film that I've produced at Sundance. Seeing your film on the big screen for the first time in front of an audience at the Sundance Film Festival is unmatched. I'm Chad Burris. I'm an attorney, a film producer, film financier, economic development financier, and I'm Chickasaw. Nobody can argue that modern day media, cinema, has perpetuated this myth, this idea of the Indian and what that is. And just the idea that, all Indians look one way or all Indians act one way is a terrible injustice. Being able to have filmmakers tell stories that are representative of some element of his surroundings, his upbringing, what they know, what they see through their own eyes, that other people get a chance to bear witness to around the world. I think that's amazing. For me personally, being an Indian today means being responsible, honest, progressive, and giving that back to the community.
Learn more about today's Chickasaws at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Well, as I indicated in our opening segment, we're really pleased today to have Dr. Keith Gaddie making his sixth appearance on The Verdict. Keith is the chairman of the Department of Political Science at the University of Oklahoma. He's been with the university since 1996. He has authored or been involved in authoring books or chapters in books numbering 14. So he's quite a prolific author. He's a regular on television and radio shows talking about all various kinds of issues, such as political issues. And that's what we're going to have him talking about today. He has been a litigation consultant on litigation that has been instituted about political races around the country from time to time. And as I said, this is his sixth appearance. Keith, welcome back. Glad to have you.
It's good to be here, Kent.
Good to have you. We caught you between your half marathon runs and got you on the set of The Verdict.
Well, I'm slow, but I'm here. So I got here just in the nick of time. Just like the cavalry, we got here just in the nick of time. So
I was thinking about the presidential race. Because it's been going on so long, there's this sense that it must be almost over. But in a sense, it's really just beginning, because with the Iowa caucuses and the events that are every week here in February, it just seems like now is when we're really going to start finding out who's for real and who's not.
Yeah, the public is really just now starting to take notice. And the time that we're visiting, we're right here before Iowa. Donald Trump skipped the last debate in Iowa and set up a bit of a kerfuffle. But, he has sucked up so much air in this race. But, I was talking with a friend this morning who said, most people are only really starting to pay attention now. A lot of this stuff that's been going on for the last year, 2, 3, 7 years when this campaign started, most people have not noticed. And they're really kind of taking a first look at these candidates. So, for Ted Cruz, for Marco Rubio, for Donald Trump, the myriad other Republicans running, a lot of folks are going to get their first look in Iowa in the week between Iowa and New Hampshire. So for the people that are watching this show, now we're really going to see the A game from these candidates where they're trying to find the space.
Yeah.
This first series of primaries leading up to Super Tuesday on March 1st, which Oklahoma is part of, will really define the race and determine who is probably going to win this nomination.
Yeah. What's the idea of having a caucus? What is that a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, caucuses are good ideas. I just don't think they're a good idea in Iowa. Okay, it's an arcane system. It's an antiquated system, and so what you do is everybody shows up in a room in their precinct, and somebody talks on behalf of a candidate. And on the Republican side, then you just cast a ballot and vote, and you leave. On the Democratic side, everybody clusters together and has to declare with their body. And then if you don't make a threshold, you then recluster until enough people have been able to elect delegates from the precinct to go to a county convention. Then they go from the county convention to the district convention and then to the state convention. The caucus system on the GOP side makes a little more sense because the vote you get will tell you who the delegates will be. The person who wins the vote will get those delegates. It's a new rule change for the Republicans. But there are so many other ways you can vote this. It's a 19th century concept, but it's kind of fun. It's like antique cars. They're fun, they're just not necessarily reliable.
Let me ask you, kind of jumping ahead and without meaning to skip over some other things I hope we'll talk about. What is your prediction about on the Republican side, will one person surface so that before the convention we know that person has enough delegates to be the nominee? Or will it be a convention where the nominee is actually selected by numerous ballots perhaps at the convention?
Well, we have not had a multi-ballot convention in 60 years. It's been a very long time. And we haven't had a truly brokered convention in over 80, almost 90 years since a truly brokered convention happened.
What do you mean by truly brokered?
That's where the party players go in the back room and the nominee can be somebody that no one thought of who wasn't really vetted in the process. And there's a question of whether or not party activists would accept such a nominee. But it could come to that. It's very early. Always explain, never predict. But look, I did a piece. I've got a regular column at the Huffington Post now that I do on electoral politics and polling and opinion. And my co-author and we did a piece back at the end of December looking at the primary calendar. And all the primaries up until Super Tuesday that Oklahoma participates in, these are what are called proportional primaries, which is you get a share of the vote, you'll also get a share of the delegate. Almost all the primaries after Super Tuesday are winner-take-all primaries. So if you got three or four candidates sticking around, all you have to do is start coming in first in places like New York, California, Illinois, out west and up north. Most of the southern primaries are proportional primaries and they're early. And so the South and the strong evangelical vote that's concentrated in the South is going to play early. And they're going to determine a front runner. But there's an opportunity for a second place candidate who's strong outside the South to overhaul them. So we'll probably end up with a nominee going in. The odds are, the law of mediocrity says so. But we need to wait and see what Iowa and New Hampshire and especially South Carolina tell us about the Republican side before we start predicting what's going to happen in June.
Well, so many of the candidates, though, are saying they're not going to drop out. They're going to be in it all the way to the convention. Now, they can change their mind, of course. Yeah. It's smart politics would probably say that is what you should say. You're committed to it. That goes without saying. But if they do that, if they all
your
stick
donors like to hear that.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, Mick, I'll be honest, if a super PAC came along and gave me $32 million to keep me afloat, I'd be taking leave from the university and running for president right now also, even though I only get 3%. It'd be fun. There's no reason to quit as long as you can keep the spigot turned on.
Right.
And for a lot of these guys, this is what they do. Chris Christie has nothing to do after this year. There's no reason for him to quit if he can stay funded. He's a guy who can do well when the primaries come north. Jeb Bush has real problems. To have this much money and this little penetration is really disturbing. But everybody remembers that this time 8 years ago, John McCain was carrying his own suitcase around with virtually no staff. He ended up as the nominee.
Right.
So
and
anything
Barack
can happen.
Obama was considered a long shot underdog at this point 8 years ago.
Yeah, and then he won Iowa.
Yeah.
And very nearly won New Hampshire, won South Carolina. Yeah,
We're still talking about the Republicans here, but
Right.
you can't help but also be wondering, there's a ticket. I mean, there's someone that's going to be with this presumed candidate. Is it going to come from the current list of candidates, or do you think someone from the outside will be the vice presidential running mate?
These guys have torn each other up so much, you wonder if you don't go outside. There are a lot of folks that, whoever is topping this ticket is going to need something that none of these candidates have shown, which is gravitas. Okay, Marco Rubio, I think, shows it. Kasich shows it. But you need somebody there, especially if you're nominating a senator, you're going to need an executive with them, right? You're going to need a governor with them. Anybody who's nominated needs somebody who can do foreign policy, because none of these folks are strong on foreign policy. Now you've got a dilemma. How do you get a governor with foreign policy if you nominate a senator? That's a very, very difficult trick to turn. I'm not sure how you do that.
Mm-hmm.
How much does Donald Trump's lack of predictability in political moves, with some obvious success,
Right.
Affect the ability to predict who a running mate's going to be? Maybe he'll be his own running mate. Who knows?
Well, I tell you what, the man has a head big enough for two, right? I mean, it's just so he could run with himself, conceivably. Indeed, he may look in the mirror and decide that's the ticket. I don't know, but Trump sucks so much air out of the room because he's shameless, right? And because he's not anchored by anything other than engaging in the fight, and it makes it fun. But he's consistently hitting this 32-35% ceiling in 30% of the electorate that is the GOP activist base. So he's got this 10% of the public that's kind of authoritarian and like somebody who's loud and has simple answers to complicated problems. But it's if a television's broken, hitting it with a hammer may be satisfying, but it doesn't fix it. If he continues to lurch along, specifics have to come to the fore. Some form of identity has to take shape, and that's just not forthcoming. But everybody else's ambition is getting in the way of setting one person up to punch it out with him.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is nobody's willing to get out of the way. It's too early.
And almost, lost in all of the discussion on the Republican side is there's a handful of states, if they need to win, they have to win. The Florida, Ohio, Wisconsin, states like that. And it always makes you wonder in the back of your mind if you're looking for a Republican ticket that could win, that Rubio Kasich ticket, that could win Florida and Ohio, might be a smart play. Now, this has turned into an emotional race. I don't know that anyone's intellectually thinking about the presidential race. It's all about emotion right now.
Yeah, well, you think about it. We've got this thing in intelligence analysis that we do for defense and national security. It's called Type 1 versus Type 2 thinking, right? Type 1 thinking is guttural, emotional, instinctual thinking, and guttural, instinctual response, and that's what we're seeing in the Republican politics right now. But then there's this Type 2 thinking, which is what we use to fight the war on terror. It's systematic, it's analytic, it's based upon data, it's careful, it considers the broad array of options, and then it makes what are strong tactical and strategic choices based upon information. We're not seeing that at all in this campaign. The one campaign that's capable of it is, of all things, Ted Cruz's campaign. One of Cruz's consultants, Chris Wilson, has done a lot of work in this state. And a lot of his folks up there, they've been reading a lot of the serious research on the movement of groups and opinion and the impact of mobilization and swing voters. They're paying attention to the lessons of the past in trying to shape a campaign. The thing with the Cruz campaign is, can they make that pivot to be attractive to the middle? Because he seems to have staked out a position that is so stark and so extreme. I just don't know if he's Reagan and can make that move.
Let me jump in and get us to a break. Keith Gaddie's our guest. We're talking about the presidential races. We'll discuss the Democratic side when we return on The Verdict.
The integrity of our air, land, and water. The energy to power our lives. They all matter.
That's why many oil and natural gas producers across Oklahoma voluntarily implement green completion methods,
Which can capture more of a well's produced gas and reduce emissions up to 90%. Cleaner air, more energy. They both matter. Learn about other ways Oklahoma producers are protecting the air at oerb.com/bothmatter.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa. where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers and our guest, Keith Gaddie. We spent the first segment largely talking about the Republican side. The Democratic side has become equally interesting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, Hillary Clinton, yet again, has come forward as the presumptive nominee, right, with a great deal of money and lessons learned from the last time she was a presumptive nominee and lost. Bernie Sanders, who is not even a Democrat, right, who is a socialist running in the Democratic Party. We have an actual socialist running the Democratic Party. The Republicans don't even have to bother to paint him as one. He actually is one.
No, he said he trumpets that he is.
He is.
He shouldn't use trumpet, but
then,
he does.
Yeah, and then you got the fellow Martin O'Malley, who was a highly capable governor and mayor back in Maryland and Baltimore. And this race has come down to Clinton and Sanders. Sanders draws very large crowds. There's a lot of enthusiasm behind his message, mainly from younger voters. Clinton's got organization. Clinton has money. Sanders has money, largely small donors. And you look at Iowa and New Hampshire, the poll data say that she may have problems. She may have problems in Iowa and New Hampshire. As we look at Iowa, and the thing we don't know at the moment, but we will know in a few days, is whether or not the people that turn out for the Iowa caucus on the Democratic side, is it the enthusiasm of Sanders that shows up in one set of polls, or is it the folks that always caucus? Those historic caucus goers, they're heavily favoring Hillary Clinton. But Hillary Clinton, yet again, is struggling with message and identity. And I mean, she'd be a great executive, but she ain't him. He was the greatest campaigner of our generation, period. I mean, he's FDR for the 21st century, and she isn't. And it keeps showing through. So she has to sell people on the notion that she's a bad candidate but a good governor.
Do you see a similarity in the message between Obama and Sanders? It's just a different style of delivering it?
Oh, absolutely. And and Sanders was at the White House last week visiting with the president. And I'm curious to see how that plays and what's going on there. But really what Sanders is promising to do is to follow through on everything that Obama started, to follow through on the next step with health care, to follow through on the next step with a non-war foreign policy. Barack Obama actually expanded the use of military force and killed more terrorists in his 8 years as president than did George Bush. A lot of people don't know that. So he doesn't have the best track record for the peaceniks. Sanders is there.
Yeah. One other thing that could happen in this race, it could be that Joe Biden is just looking for a way to get in.
Yeah.
And if Hillary were to struggle, it would be his entrance point.
Well, my friend and president, David Boren, did everything he could to try and get Joe Biden to consider running for president. I mean, he showed up at an event back in November, right before when Biden dropped out, saying he had spent a good bit of time on the phone trying to convince Biden to get in. But his heart's just not there. Now we got this guy, Michael Bloomberg, floating around.
I was going to ask you, what's the effect of him? He's presumably going to jump in as an independent.
Yeah, and who knows, because we're not sure where he pulls from, because he was a Republican, but he's also to the left on some issues, but he is the 14th richest man in the world. Yeah, I have no idea where he lands on this. I'm not entirely convinced that he is a good national campaigner. He's a very bright man. He was a highly capable and successful mayor. I like him personally. I like him politically, although I do like my giant Coke. But he just has not turned the corner to appeal to a national audience.
Well, that's right. I mean, he's definitely left of center socially, fiscally. He's kind of conservative in some aspects and not so conservative in other aspects. But he very much relies on data, and he's data driven, and You know, and you know, a lot of private sector CEOs are data driven, and he kind of approaches it from that way. But you make a good point. You know, as a candidate, it's different. He spent $82 million on his last mayoral campaign in New York City of his own money, and he barely won. He was the incumbent, but he got the third term out of it. And he would presumably spend all of his own money, probably $1 billion or $2 billion, on an independent campaign. But you just wonder, so who does he hurt, you know, in the race? And I guess it depends ultimately how many independents get in.
Well, it also depends who the nominees are. You know, if he jumps in and somehow Trump survives this campaign and Hillary Clinton's the Democratic nominee, 3 candidates from New York, 3 very different candidates from New York who know each other well. I don't know if the rest of the country is ready for that, but the thing is, it means he basically has to take all the middle. He has to take all the middle. And that would be a very nifty trick, but I don't think $1 billion would be enough. I think if you look at his campaigns for mayor if you extrapolate from his campaigns in New York, he'd have to spend $4 billion on his national campaign to replicate the spending effort he spent just in New York City.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a daunting task.
If he could get in with Trump and Sanders, there might be a big middle there to grab.
Oh, I think there's a giant middle to grab with those two in there. In fact, at that point, the Democratic Party faces a distinct possibility of falling into third place because he becomes the de facto center to center-left candidate, and that 20% of the far left in the Democratic Party just falls off.
Yeah.
What is the effect, if any, on the ultimate outcome in Iowa and New Hampshire of Bill Clinton jumping in this last week?
Yeah.
Or what we're hearing, he's going to jump in with Chelsea also, but I think primarily Bill. What impact?
Well, remember, money doesn't matter to Chelsea, so she's got time. But everybody loves him some Bill Clinton, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's just we love to see him coming. He's Elvis. I just wonder what's left to activate there. Where Bill Clinton matters is South Carolina with that African American vote. That's the key. Bill Clinton sets Hillary up to stabilize her with black voters in the South. Hillary runs the table on Super Tuesday. As long as she can hold 70% of the black vote, she sweeps Super Tuesday, she sweeps the nomination. Iowa, New Hampshire, he'll get those people that love Bill Clinton. But everybody forgets, in 1992, the last time Bill Clinton was on an open ballot, an open seat ballot, he lost Iowa, and he didn't win New Hampshire. He came in second to Paul Tsongas.
Yeah.
People in Oklahoma are looking ahead to 2018. What's shaping up there?
Well, you know, on the Republican side, there's every indication the lieutenant governor runs. People are still waiting. Todd Lamb, waiting to hear the Attorney General's plans. Scott Pruitt. You know, there are other Republican possibilities. Of course, you know, the late Commissioner Costello was a possibility to run, and tragedy has taken that opportunity away. But the Democratic side is waiting for Dan Boren to decide what he is going to do, because Dan Boren's decision dictates what Joe Dorman does, because Joe Dorman will not run against Dan Boren, right? They're good friends. That's not going to happen. It could dictate what the House leader, Scott Inman, does, because there's been talk about Scott running for governor. There are other possibilities that float about. It could be a very interesting race. The most interesting thing about it, though, is it depends on our energy sector and our economy. I mean, Oklahoma City, the metro, will be strong. Okay, we've done the things we needed to do in the last 25 years to diversify and weather this downturn in oil prices. But for the rest of the state, it's going to be hard times. And those hard times are not going away in the rural parts of Oklahoma. And the question is, who's going to speak to that, and where do those voters go? And I don't know.
Does Bridenstine get in? We have just a few seconds
Been
left.
hearing that. Yeah. And what's interesting, if Bridenstine gets in at that point, does Scott Pruitt go back and look at an old opportunity? He ran for Congress 15 years ago. Does he run for Bridenstine's seat up there in Congressional District 1?
Interesting.
Like I said, a lot of moving parts here, but only one congressperson has ever made it to the governor's mansion, and she's there now.
Is that right?
That's a tough move to make in Oklahoma.
Keith Gaddie has been our guest today on The Verdict. Keith, the time went way too fast. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah,
and
you
giving
need
us
to
your
come back.
opinions.
Pleasure to be here, guys.
Got a lot of other things we could talk about.
Well, let's shoot another one.
Kent and I'll have a final word right after this.
There are now 11 million of us who live here and work here. I was 15 when I came here 6 years ago. I raised my family here. I drive my truck to my job every day. The only difference between now And 6 years ago, I do it legally. I wanted to. Because this is my home.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
You have children coming from a different lifestyle, different mindset. You have to open your arms and really do what you have to do to have that child become a part of your family. And if it's more patience, that's what you do. Kids gotta know they can trust you. And that's what we've tried to do with these kids.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Wrapping up a show on Keith Gaddie, who kind of gave us some views on the presidential race and the state races.
Yeah, it went way too fast.
Yeah.
We had a lot more to talk about, but Keith has his finger on the pulse of these things. That's where he lives and works, and does quite well at both. And he gave us some views, I think, that will be proven to be true.
The month of February has 4 states getting involved. There's one every week, and then Oklahoma's involved right at the 1st of March, Super Tuesday, and at that point,
how many are in the Super Tuesday? Do you know?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, are
several.
there 2 or 3? Or?
No, there's more than that. There's several, but I think it'll look a lot more clear. That's going to do it for this week's show. We'll see you next week right here on The Verdict.